Hello and welcome everyone, and thank you for joining me. My name is Jo Grimmond and I come to you today from the other side of the world in Australia. As your weather is cooling down over there, our weather is certainly heating up, coming into summer. So thank you for joining me today. I come to you from the University of Wollongong. I'm just going to share my screen and we'll get started. All right, so today we're going to talk about how we can engage our children and engage them, engaging our young engineers and using construction materials for learning. We're going to explore that and we're going to engage in some constructive play. I'm going to give you some ideas today to take away with you to really evoke some engineering skills with your children and play alongside them. We're going to learn how to use loose parts and other construction skills to enhance and learn about STEM principles in building. So before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the Abu Dhabi Early Childhood Authority for making this initiative a reality, this wonderful Parenting During a Pandemic and Beyond series a reality. We're very grateful to them. And before I start, in Australia, it's our tradition before we present to acknowledge the traditional owners of our lands across Australia. So I'm going to do that before we start. I respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the many lands across Australia. I acknowledge the contribution made by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, with particular reference to the education of young children, and I recognise their existence long before our story began. And I work at the University of Australia, of Wollongong in Australia, and you can see an image of Wollongong on the screen now. It's a very pretty area. But today I'm coming to you on Yuin country, what's called Yuin country, which is on the south coast of New South Wales, about 6 hours drive south of Sydney, if you know where Sydney is. And the University of Wollongong is on Dharawal country. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to consider the importance of developing STEM learning in the early years. We're going to relook at that. We're going to learn about the importance of block and construction play for STEM learning and how that fits into that. We're going to explore how we can use construction materials in the home to engage children in engineering and design skills, because we want our children to be future innovators and engineers, don't we? And we're going to explore construction activities together with materials you can find in the home to engage your child with design challenges. I'm going to give you some tips and tricks, and I'm going to send you away with some challenges to do with your children to promote STEM learning. So why is STEM important in the early years? So let's revisit why that is, especially in the early years in relation to lifelong learning. As I said, we want our children to be innovators and engineers in the future, don't we? So firstly, the experiences children have during those early years are extremely important for that lifelong learning, like I just said. And as your child's first teacher, you're the parent, your role is vitally important in creating lots of opportunities that promote this learning in playful scenarios, so playing alongside your child or your children. Essentially learning through play and exploring materials with them, posing questions and evoking wonder. And children are naturally curious, and they have a natural desire to explore all of their surroundings, make discoveries and try new things out on the way. Why is it like that? What could possibly happen if it were different than its present state? What could happen if I build this way? And how can I change how that works? Questions like this provoke them to find solutions and bombard their information-hungry brains the moments they lay eyes on anything new. And as your child's first teacher, you can start building their STEM skills from an early age, creating solid foundations for future learning. By encouraging your child to play, explore and investigate, you are helping them become active participants in their own learning. So, as I said, we need to treat all areas of STEM holistically rather than dividing them into categories like science, technology, engineering and maths. We're going to focus on engineering today, but we're going to talk about STEM principles and how we can use those in our building with our children. Children engage in motivation, enjoyment, positive attitudes to learning. We want them to have a positive attitude, don't we? It's certainly important that as an adult, we are the child's play partner and use the vehicle of play to enhance learning. And today we're going to see how we can do that with construction materials. We need to learn how to ask open-ended questions and pose problems to them to solve, ultimately allowing the child to be in charge of the play. We need to guide them, but we need to have fun with the child and show interest in the learning as well. Children engage in problem solving, investigation, and they certainly do that when we're engaging in engineering and construction activities. They manipulate, they experiment, and these are all key components of STEM learning. And when children are engaged in these processes, they are essentially learning. Children develop important skills for future STEM learning. So STEM education helps us better understand our world and relate to it. STEM involves introducing children to new concepts through activities and games. It essentially helps them live the concepts rather than only reading about them. By children engaging in STEM in play, they evoke wonder, they innovate, like I said, they make meaning in their play. And we as the adult and as the parent have a key role to play in this by engaging in the learning with the children. It's not our role to have all the answers. We need to explore with the children and engage in the wonder with them. Discover with them, hypothesize with them, make predictions with them, test those predictions with hands-on materials, and we're going to be talking about how we're going to do that in construction. We need to also encourage them to notice things in their environment, noticing changes, noticing things that they're changes that they're making to their engineering masterpieces and so on. Discovering new things about the world and engineering a masterpiece with blocks or Lego, for example. So STEM in the home learning environment requires a belief that children are capable. A strengths-based approach, this is called. A belief that the child's voice is important, and we're going to certainly be talking a lot about that today when we get the children to represent their designs, like you can see in the photo. That little girl is drawing her design, and we're going to certainly talk about the importance of that today. We need to value for the open-ended processes of problem solving, discovery, investigation, and that sense of wonder. A value for playing with materials and loose parts. A value for time to play and explore, and they certainly need time to engage in engineering skills in the home learning environment. So set aside lots of time to really get your child to play with those loose parts and those building materials, because they need to have time to build, but they also need time to play with what they've come up with, don't they? A value for seeing STEM in the everyday, a value for the child as the instigator of the play. So we're going to talk about benefits of block play, and if you're lucky enough to have some blocks at home, I really recommend you get them out and you play with your children with blocks, because blocks are certainly, and Lego are certainly a fantastic vehicle for rich building and construction engineering skills and importance of exploring those engineering skills. And I love this quote by Elizabeth Hirsch in 1984, who wrote the Block Book. It's called, "The pleasure of blocks stems primarily from the aesthetic experience. Learning results from the imaginative activity, from the need to pose and solve problems." So not only do they need time to build, but they need time to play with their building and explore their construction. So what are the other benefits of block play? Well, construction play affords so many opportunities for rich mathematics and engineering learning, which involves exploring shape, geometry in maths, And children engage in engineering design skills to thoughtfully plan what they're going to build and how they can use the materials available to enhance their engineering masterpieces. I like using that terminology because they are engineering masterpieces. When children are given time to plan, they need time to construct, and they need time to create with blocks and other materials. They develop socially, emotionally, cognitively, and physically. Children explore many mathematical concepts, including sorting, classification, ordering, counting, geometric and spatial understanding, size and shape. They are learning engineering skills and spatial reasoning skills when they experiment with forces of gravity, the relationship between materials, and they're designed to achieve balance, to achieve stability, and even achieve aesthetic sensibility when they create aesthetically pleasing constructions where they're happy with what they've created, like that amazing image that you can see on the screen now. They learn critical social skills of negotiation, collaboration, cooperative problem solving. They learn how to listen to others. They learn to practice self-regulation. They learn how to, and an example of that is, being okay with when their building falls down and falls apart. They learn to experiment with different blocks and how to put blocks on top of and below, and use that language with the children as well. They learn how to enter the play. They learn how to take turns with you. They learn how to listen respectfully. They learn how to understand different perspectives as they try out new roles in the play. They focus their attention for extended periods of time because they need time to build. They need time to engineer. And they express their ideas and independently or collaboratively solve problems with you as well. They are motivated to learn, and they enjoy being engaged in such a rich experience. They engage in creativity. They become creators. And as they manipulate and arrange the objects in their constructions, they organise them in what I like to call harmonious and aesthetically appealing designs. They actually like what they've made and created. They are learning engineering skills and spatial reasoning skills when they experiment with those forces like I talked about before, of gravity and balance and stability and things like that. They are motivated to learn, and they enjoy being engaged in such a rich experience with you. So play alongside them, build your own constructions, or work collaboratively with your child. Mark Tompkins, which is a researcher, and I love this quote, in 1991, he described the block area, the block play as an environment, as a laboratory for spatial thinking. I love that terminology, laboratory for spatial thinking, as children encounter and they experiment with many spatial concepts and their vocabulary that they're using when they construct with the blocks. And research certainly highlights the importance of spatial reasoning skills for lifelong learning, because this is how we learn how to fill a room with furniture, for example, or to navigate a building. These skills are certainly enhanced through block and construction play. So blocks are a timeless toy. They never stop challenging, stimulating and engaging young children. And if you don't have blocks at home and you can't access blocks, it's a fantastic resource for children to have all the way through their childhood and older childhood times as well, because it's such an open-ended resource. So I do encourage you to invest in some blocks for your home learning environment. Because it's certainly a fantastic resource, open-ended resource for rich engineering and STEM learning. And I love this quote by her. So, child's artistry in block building is closely related to the true mathematician's view of mathematics as a creative art, which I love. I love that quote. And you can see in that image in front of us how that child has certainly had a long time to create, and how he's used so many different loose parts, so many different materials in that fantastic block construction. And now that he's put the time and effort into creating that, he can now play with it. So we need to give our children time and space. So a great idea is to have a space in your home to dedicate for, it might be in their bedroom or it might be another place, to dedicate for rich construction so that they have time to construct their masterpieces, but they also have time to play with it. And if you can, leave it there and let your child return to that area so that they can change and make changes and modifications to their building as well, or turn it into something completely different and use it in a different way in their imaginative play, but certainly engage in them. There's been lots of research to say that block play is closely related to mathematical understandings and engineering, and it's truly a vehicle for that rich STEM learning and STEM practice in play. And one particular study that was done with lots of preschoolers, so lots of children 3 to 5 year olds, that it was conducted by researchers at University of Delaware and Temple University, and they found for low-income preschoolers who lag in spatial skills, such play may be especially important. So it's certainly important to engage your children in rich construction and engineering skills in the home so that we can really cement that learning. And they also found that more than 100 3-year-olds of various socioeconomic levels took part in the study, and they found that if children were better at copying block structures, they were also better at early maths. And among the skills tested were whether children could figure out that a block belongs above or below another block, and whether they aligned the pieces. So certainly those what we like to call spatial reasoning skills. The study also found that by age 3, children from lower income families were already falling behind in spatial skills, and that was likely a result of more limited experience with blocks, and parents of low income toddlers reported using significantly fewer words. They weren't using the words above and below, so I really recommend that you use that rich mathematical language, and it's really easy to do, of below, above, beside, asking questions like, I wonder what would happen if you put this large rectangular block on top of this square block. I wonder what would happen, and get your child to predict what might happen as well. Certainly, another study found that children who performed at high levels of block building also showed high levels of mathematical achievement in later schooling. So if that doesn't say that blocks are important, I don't know what is. So if you have not got blocks at home, Lego is really important as well. But particularly blocks, if you don't have some blocks at home, I do recommend that you get some, and you can easily also use things in the home like cardboard boxes and things that you can find. So we're going to talk about that later on as well. Here's some other examples, and because I like using lots of images, and I'm certainly liking that today, particularly drawing your attention to the image on the right at the top, where that young child has used tins and paper rolls like this, and CDs, old CDs, and fabric squares, and small blocks and large blocks this size, but also smaller blocks. And I can even see that, they can use the Lego blocks and smaller blocks as well in their construction. Yeah, certainly using lots of different materials. So I encourage you to search your home for what you could find after this workshop today, and go on a hunt with your child in your house to see what you could find for rich some STEM engineering skills, like boxes like this that I've collected, or plastic containers. So I encourage you to recycle packaging as well. Tins like this, biscuit tins are great as well. And using tape rather than glue, they can tape things together, or they can just position them. But think about, what other things that you've got in the house to use for construction. Now, other examples on the screen, you can see measuring, so using blocks to measure, so measuring the pumpkins next to a big line of blocks, and the smaller blocks as well. I love the one down the bottom where children have used, they've made their own other creations with drawings and cut out road signs, and they've used pictures of themselves and family members. to cut out, print off and cut out and just stick onto the blocks so that they can use those in their play as well. Because remember, like I said before, they have time, they need time to engage in their construction, playing with their construction that they've built as well. And they've used soft toys and toys and cars as part of their construction too. Really like that one. I remember creating an Olympic village with children that I was teaching at preschool by getting them to make the different signs for the countries, and it became this amazing Olympic village that came to life. You can see an example of using mud. I'm not sure if you'd like your children using mud in the house, but thinking about other things that you've got in the house, like in your pantry, like rice or other things that you could use. They've created a shop. And they've used cardboard there as well. So thinking about other materials in that you can use to enhance your children's play. You can see down the bottom, plumbing pipe being used outside to create ramps and engineer a ramp and a track for, it could be a track for tennis balls or balls to go down, or it could be other small balls like these ones to go down. So creating and engineering a marble track or a ball track is what we're going to talk about soon as well. So just before we go on, I just want to give you some understanding about the development of block play and how children develop in their engineering skills when they're using blocks. So there is a stage of block play that they work through, and you can see that on the screen now. So when they're very young, so toddlers, and they just like to carry them around. So they fill them up in buckets, or they push them in wheelbarrows, or they push them in trolleys. They're not really building with the blocks. They're just using them to carry from one place to another. That's the start of block play. And then they start to build. So then they start by putting two blocks together and they start bridging. Or before they even do that, they start lining blocks up from side to side. So in the previous photo that I showed you where they were lining the blocks up, that's what they start to do. And then they start bridging. So they start joining a space. So putting a block over the top like this, and they start making bridges. So they start making some more structures in their designs as they connect the space between two blocks with a third block. Then they start enclosing a space, and this is really exciting to see. And I'm going to show you some photos in a minute to illustrate these different stages. But then they start building the enclosures and joining blocks to create spaces. And they might have a specific purpose for that space. So they might enclose a space for a zoo or a farm, or they might enclose a space for people. So they might make a house, things like that. So they're starting to enclose a space. And then they start decorating their designs. So they start using decorative designs and patterns, and you start seeing a bit of balance in their design. So symmetry and things like that. So they're using those engineering skills, that higher developed engineering skills to make symmetrical designs. And as they become more experienced in their block play and construction play, their buildings and constructions become more sophisticated and imaginative. They create more elaborate designs with noticeable patterning and balance, and they use a larger number and variety of blocks, like you saw that little boy doing in that first slide. And then they begin to name their structures in their dramatic play. They may have named their structures before, but their names or their labels are closely related to the functions of the building, like farms or zoos or houses or castles. And then they may try to replicate or symbolise, and this is an activity I'm going to set you today, which is also in your handout. They try to replicate their structures so that they know, so for example, using images as provocations, so inspirational images that you've found on the internet, like the Taj Mahal or a castle, and they try to look for specific blocks or Lego pieces or construction pieces, or roles like this as the columns and things like that, triangular blocks for the top and the roofs and things like that. So they have very specific purposes to use their construction materials for like curved blocks for arches, for example, and triangles for steeples in castles, for example. So just wanted to share that with you. And here's some examples that you can see on the screen. So that first image, you can see lining the blocks end to end up. So they've gone from carrying the blocks around to lining the blocks up. Then you can see quite an elaborate bridging construction. It looks like a car park, doesn't it? Where they've put cars in their block construction. And then you can see the next one where they start enclosing the space and creating enclosures. And then they start naming them, and you can see that they start, you know, having symmetry in their buildings, like the bottom image. So you can see that their design is quite aesthetically pleasing, and you can see symmetry. Then they start naming them, and it has a specific purpose. That little girl down the bottom has written an elaborate story about her block construction. And then they start replicating. So that 5-year-old down the bottom, you can see, has just been visiting a train museum, and she has actually tried to replicate using blocks the train museum, which is really exciting. So I've just noticed the time, and time's getting away from me, but I'll keep going. So how can we scaffold and guide a deeper engagement in block and construction play to really encourage our little young engineers? We can certainly do this, and we can encourage them to use building and construction materials to represent their thoughts and ideas and understandings. We can do this by listening to their conversations during their play. We can do this by posing those questions or problems for children to solve. You know, things like asking them what would happen if, and I wonder what would happen if you put this block here, or noticing things in their construction is a fantastic way of extending that learning as well. And we can invite them to engage with new and interesting materials. We can also plan interesting provocations by providing what I like to call design challenges, which I'm going to show you in a moment. So using questions like you can see on the screen. So what does my child already know about block building? What does my child talk about and wonder as they are building? What do I notice as I observe my child building? What role will I play in this investigation? And what strategies could I employ to extend and deepen my child's thinking? So asking yourself that question when you're watching and involving yourself in your child's play. So how can we use loose parts and materials in the home in construction? So there's some examples, and we've already talked about blocks, and we've already talked about Lego, but what about the cereal boxes and packaging boxes? Look at that city that a child's made with their parent. Look at the road, look at the paper that they've created for windows. They've drawn their own windows. They've created people as well. By cutting them out with paper, and they've added they've also added little trees that they've made with their parents, and they've given it a name. They've used labeling, so lots of literacy is coming into that play as well. So you can certainly do that by posing a provocation or linking it in with your child's interest. If they love trains, for example, then try making a train track or a train with boxes and construction, and talk about that design with your children. You can see down the bottom, somebody's made a digger or excavator with just cardboard boxes, and I love the image on the right where, you know, using paper rolls to create a very aesthetically pleasing building, but there's lots of there's corks there, and I'm sure you can find some corks in your home, or popsicle sticks, stones, shells, paper plates, plastic plates, boxes, like I said before, plastic containers, lots of different and lots of other loose materials that we've engaged with previously. Sticks and stones are great loose parts for them to decorate their buildings with as well. So I encourage you to, you know, see what you can find in the home to play with your children. So posing design challenges. So this is an activity where you can make a marble track or a ball track. You could use a small ball like this that's quite light, a ping pong ball, for example, or a plastic little ball that they could blow through their track with a straw. Or you could push the marble with a popsicle stick or a stick that you find in your garden through the marble track. So the design brief would be to design and engineer a marble track, or a track for a small ball or a ping pong ball. Collect materials that you can find in the home, like you can use lots of things. Paper rolls are a great way to to use for tunnels, and you can cut them open for ramps as well, for the marble or the small ball to go through. You can use blocks, you can use Lego to create and construct your marble track. And so see what you can find in your home, and then test. You can see the image down the bottom where I was doing this with a group of 7-year-olds, but you can certainly do this with younger children as well. And so play alongside them. Engineer or design with your child. So think about how it's going to look. Ask them, what do you think it's going to look like? Maybe get them to draw it if they're older children, and test it. Test it. You could blow the ball with a straw through the track to see if it works. You could have little ramps, like you could see in the bottom image. They use a ramp. They used a plastic lid as a ramp to get the marble started, to give it some propulsion. So my challenge for you today is to create, one of my challenges is for you to design and engineer a marble or a ball track with your child, and then get them to draw it. Another one, you could get them to design and engineer a 3-dimensional symmetrical construction. So using blocks or paper rolls again, or boxes that you have in the home, and masking tape, I call it, but tape, sellotape that you can stick together, popsicle sticks, like you can see down the bottom. I can see they've used counters to decorate the construction. So collect materials from your home, work together with your child, have your child draw their design, engineer your design, and draw it, and then get them to compare. With your older children, you can do this, to compare to their original design, see what they've changed about it. What did they make it, why did they make it differently, and talk about that with your children as well. So another activity that you could engage with your child in, and use technology to do this, is actually design and engineer something from an image. So you can see examples on the screen now where a child has used the image of the Colosseum, and he's replicated that with the blocks, and he's used a clipboard to document his drawing. You can see the Eiffel Tower that another boy or a girl has made. You can see the replication of the building. So find lots of different images on the internet and see if you can replicate them. Down the bottom, I love that. That's my favourite, because it's the Sydney Harbour Bridge. And you can see how a child with his parent has created that archway with a piece of paper, and used, I think they're skewers. He's used skewers as the pylons of the bridge, and the bigger pylons are actually paper rolls. So think about what you could do with your children, because they just love it. They love replicating things. And so find the image with your child, and then think about and plan how they're going to use, and what sort of materials they're going to use for each of the parts of the building. We're nearly finished. And then the other activity that I'd like you to try after the webinar is build a working bridge. So you can use Lego to do that, and then test it with something that weighs, that's light but also heavy, and see how much weight it can hold. So actually test your design, test your child's design. You can see how cardboard and paper rolls are being used down the bottom, or popsicle sticks have been glued together. Sure, I tell you that your child will love testing it out with things that you can find in the pantry, like cans of things, or different weights like marbles, or different weighted balls and things like that. You can see someone's testing it with a tractor down the bottom. So test it, and test it until it collapses, because children will love seeing their bridge collapse too under the weight. But also representing their design. So draw, draw, draw. So as much as you can, get your child to represent their constructions, provide clipboards and drawing tools, and encourage children to design before and draw designs after, and compare them. Talk about changes that they've made and modifications with your child. Use other materials and loose parts to add to the construction, like tins and CDs and stones and beads and carpet squares, fabric, material, paper rolls, anything that you can find in your house. Final thoughts. Construction play affords so many opportunities for rich mathematics and engineering learning. Children engage in engineering design skills to thoughtfully plan what they are going to build and how they can use the materials available to enhance their engineering masterpieces. When children are given time to plan, construct and create with blocks and materials, they develop socially, emotionally, cognitively, and physically. Our next session will be looking at technology and how we can use technology to enhance investigation and inquiry-based learning in STEM areas. And I gave you an idea about how to use technology today. And I encourage you to, when you engage in those wonderful design challenges, take photos of them, and I encourage you to upload them to the website when we ask you to. Engineer a marble or a ball track, engineer a symmetrical building, replicate a building design with your child, and build a bridge and test it. And that, I'm sorry, I've gone a little bit over time, but that finishes our the webinar today. And I'd like to thank you for listening and invite you to ask any questions that you've got that you may want to ask me. So I invite you to ask. I'm just going to keep an eye on these questions. Okay, so when can I start using blocks? Now, baby is 9 months old. Start now, get them to manipulate, because that's their early engineering skills. Okay, so get them to feel the blocks. So get, you know, you can buy the softer blocks that are made out of fabric and material, or you can use boxes that you've got from packaging. So collect lots of different boxes like that, and just give your baby a chance to explore the shape and engage in mathematical learning about shape. So definitely it's not not too early a time to start. You can start now and give them lots of exploration with blocks. You can certainly get some bigger blocks for them to manipulate. Obviously, they're going to have trouble a little bit with the smaller blocks, but get them some good sized blocks to manipulate and explore, and just play with them and use that language, that rich language to that we know that's going to help them develop their language skills. You know, obviously you're not going to get the language back, getting lots of babbling, but remember that the most important time of the period of our life is between birth to 5. So use lots of language to say above and below and next to and beside and behind. So use that terminology when you're playing with your baby, and lots of effects. So lots of looking at them and talking and just getting them to explore. And you build and go up and up and up and up and build it up, and play, sing songs like that with them as well, to explore engineering with a baby. But you can certainly do lots of things now. Hope I've answered your question. Any other questions that are coming my way? I've also got some questions that I've got up my sleeve, because we've got some time for questions now. Any others coming through at all? All right, so while I'm waiting for you to think of any questions to ask, and thank you for that wonderful question that you ask, and certainly get them manipulating objects, right? You can certainly do that now, and different objects that are different sizes and shapes as well. Okay, so another question has come through. How about the child with a delay of development? How can we engage them? Well, much the same as a baby, depending on how old your child with a developmental delay is. But you can certainly engage them in just exploring and feeling and playing with blocks and materials. So playing with 3-dimensional objects and exploring that shape with your child. So certainly with your child with the delay development, again, like I just answered that parent about the baby. So using lots of that rich mathematical terminology, like above and below and beside, and build it up, 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 up. And depending on what their language is like, you'll usually go one step above what they can do. So if they're using 1 words, then you go 2 words, or 1 word and 2 words. When you're using language with them. So my expertise is not working with children with developmental delay, but I would suggest that just getting them to play with materials and yeah, like that, and engaging with them with 3-dimensional objects getting them to explore that shape and properties of each of those objects. So hopefully I've answered your question, Regina. Thank you for that. Any other questions? So a question that I tend to get is around, oh, you're very welcome, Regina, is around technology, because I don't know about you, but my child is constantly, during COVID, has been constantly on, when we've been in lockdown, it's been constantly on technology, and he's 15, so I'm not talking about his age group, but I can certainly relate to children really being attracted to technology, and we're going to talk a little bit of how we can use that effectively next week. But a question I often get would be, my children are only interested in playing with technology. How can I encourage them to engage in engineering and design challenges with me when all they want to do is play games on their iPads or their iPhones or their computer? And I certainly get this question on every one of my workshops, because it's certainly a very common one. And but think about the design challenges that you can use with technology with. So if they're really interested in technology, then use it as a research tool to find different designs in human-made forms. Like, have a look at what buildings that they can relate to that are in your area, or things like the Taj Mahal or castles, pictures of castles, and then talk to them about how they're going to use materials for each of those components of that castle, like we talked about. So you can certainly use that interest in technology to explore engineering with them, with real materials as well. So rather than getting them to play with engineering applications, there are some good ones out there, but there's a lot that aren't very good. So just make sure that I really encourage you to play with real materials. So getting them to actually use those images as provocations or inspirations for their building. So using real blocks and real paper rolls and real Lego materials when they're looking and creating with those images on technology. So that's a question that I often get. Another question I get with this one in mind, with blocks. My 3-year-old doesn't know how to build with blocks. Is this a concern, and what can I do about it? Remember that development of block play that I talked about earlier? Maybe your child just hasn't been exposed to blocks before, and it's all about experience, isn't it? So, just getting them to push blocks around, that's the start of block play. So if they're carrying blocks around, toddlers carrying blocks around, giving them containers to fill, to push their blocks around or carry their blocks around from one room to another, that's all experience with blocks. And then they'll move to that, and you can certainly model. So you can model lining the blocks up next to each other. So putting blocks together like this on the ground and lining them up, or building them on top of each other is another way. They go vertically or they go horizontally. So building them, so you be the model next to them, and then they'll start doing it as well. And then in no time, you'll see them progressing from lining the blocks up to actually using blocks in a more thoughtful way, creating bridges by, putting 2 blocks and putting a block to join the space up between. And it's really wonderful to watch, and very interesting to watch that happening too, because they experiment with how big a distance between the blocks they need to join it and create that blocks. And that's okay, because that's all part of that investigation, that STEM practice that we talk about. So that's all engaging in that. So let them play with it, let them explore and get it wrong as well, and experiment and ask those questions. Do you think you might need to make the space smaller, or maybe we could find something else that's longer that could link those 2 blocks up. So, using cardboard, paper, different rulers, different things that you've got in the home, to plumbing pipes if you're lucky enough to have that laying around, different materials that you can use, larger boxes, cereal boxes, you can use that as the bridge to connect those 2 smaller paper rolls like this. You can use the cereal boxes, or the smaller boxes like the packaging boxes, or just experiment with them. So yeah, that's another one that I tend to get. So no concern, just give them lots of experience with playing with different blocks and different construction materials. So just let's check if I've got any other questions coming in. What's the time? Got time for a couple more questions. So sometimes I've got a question from a lovely parent about when they can start using blocks with their baby. Well, I get questions about what are some more activities that I can do with older children. You just add those challenges. Remember those design challenges that I gave you ideas around. You just add the challenge with your older children, so get them to draw their design before they build and draw it after they build, and then compare them. When you're doing that with a younger child, for example, a 4-year-old, you wouldn't potentially get them, unless they're up to it, you wouldn't get them to draw it before, you just get them to draw it after. But as they become more skilled and equipped and experienced with it, and experienced with the block construction play, whether that be Lego or blocks, then they will potentially be able to draw their designs and predict and then design, and then have a look at what their drawings look like afterwards. So I have done it with younger children as well. It just depends on how much experience they've had with construction. So yeah, my advice is just to play with, find what you've got in your house, use Tupperware containers. If you haven't got blocks are a fantastic resource, so it would be a fantastic thing to invest in for your child. That will give them give them a long time to extend their engineering skills. Older children really enjoy playing with, we know that children love playing with Lego for a long time. So Lego and blocks are a fantastic resource to invest in. And with Lego, open-ended, like just playing, getting them to engage with Lego rather than, it is a good idea to follow, to build Lego for following instructions as well, because that's fantastic spatial reasoning skills. But when we want them to innovate and create, let's give them open-ended resources as well. So a balance between the two is a really great idea. Or get them to create their own instructions. So draw their own designs of the Lego and what they're going to make and what pieces they're going to use as well. But yeah, it's all about giving them experience with the materials. Have time for a couple more questions. I think I've covered my questions. Yeah. So what are some other ways to engage really young children in engineering? So I've answered that question for that lovely parent about her baby or him baby being 9 months old and best ways to use blocks. So it's just give them materials to, babies love to, they're very sensory and they're learning a lot through their senses. So they're learning a lot through sound, they're learning a lot. So that's why we need to use that mathematical talk, and we used to talk to them all the time because that's how they develop language. They're watching us, so modelling, so they're using their sight as a sense as well. So lots of modelling of buildings and building them up and then having them crash down, and singing lots of songs like build it up, build it higher, and things like that when you're playing with your children and playing with the baby, and just you build the tower up and get them to knock it down, and that's okay as well. So just really playing alongside them and being really engaged in their play from really early on, and giving them experiences with different shapes and different sensations of wood, but also other, when we're looking at younger babies, and there are softer blocks that you can get, or foam blocks that you can get for them as well. But they can certainly engage with blocks with you, with wooden blocks with you alongside them, building alongside them as well, because you're supervising them. But I just get them to experience those construction materials and boxes. They'll put things in their mouth, and that's okay, because they're learning through their senses, their taste sense as well, and that's okay. So just make sure that if you're playing with your baby with engineering, then you're providing things that it's okay for them to put in their mouth, and it's okay if they put a paper roll in their mouth and it goes all soggy, you can just get another one. It's all about experiencing the different shapes, three-dimensional shapes. Yeah, I might just give you a chance to ask one more question if anybody's got one more question, and then we'll finish for the day. Anyone else got a question that they really want me to answer? But again, I'd just like to take this opportunity of saying thank you for joining me today. It's one of my absolute passions. Blocks is one of my absolute passions, and Lego and construction materials. I don't actually think I did a lot of that when I was young, and because I've got I tend to have a lot of trouble with my spatial reasoning skills with navigating around a building, and maybe I didn't play enough with blocks. They really need to have exposure and experience playing with blocks and Lego and other construction materials that you can easily find in the home. So have fun playing, and see if you can go through those design challenges that I talked to you about that are in your handout as well, that you can download off the website, and have a go of, you know, really engaging in fabulous design challenges, marble tracks and ball tracks with your children, and really explore and experiment with them and hypothesize and engage in those STEM principles. Oh, you're very, very welcome. Thanks again, everyone. Yeah, they play with blocks in groups or alone. Oh, alone is fine with you because you play alongside them. But, you know, they learn socially from others. So if you've got other children around, engaging your older siblings in the play as well, not getting them to take over the play, but just getting them to play alongside them, because we know that children learn from older, more experienced others. So getting your child engaged in other children is fantastic, because they're learning those rich skills of social turn taking and negotiation, and respecting each other's wishes, and which comes from cooperative play, which block play affords. So if you have a chance, yeah, definitely worth engaging with other children. But if they only have you at home in the home learning environment, then you be their play partner, and you engage them in those cooperative skills. I hope I've answered that question. Certainly, yes. You're welcome. Thanks again, everybody. I think we'll finish now, but thanks again for joining me, and good luck engaging in those design challenges. You're very, very welcome. Yeah, you're welcome. Bye, everyone.